The story I'm going to tell you today isn't just a bank robbery. This is one of the largest, most sophisticated, and politically explosive crimes in American history. Forget Hollywood movies. Ocean's 11 or La Casa de Papel look like amateurs next to these guys. Because the thieves in this story didn't just rob a bank, they robbed the President of the United States.
This is the best bank burglary crew the FBI had ever seen.
63-year-old James Dinsio of Canfield came out of the FBI office in Boardman first on his way to federal court in Akron on bank burglary charges.
This was the big time. He had never encountered a bank that had so much money.
Yes, you heard that right. This event, which took place on a stormy March weekend in 1972 in a quiet coastal town in California, went down in FBI records as the greatest bank vault burglary in American history. Although the stolen amount appeared as $9 million in official records, rumors suggested it exceeded $30 million. And do you know the most interesting part? The owner of a large portion of this money was the U.S. President of the time, Richard Nixon. In this video, I will explain in detail how a group of professional thieves planned to steal the dirty money of the most powerful man in the world, how they breached a supposedly impossible vault using surfboard foam and dynamite, and how they were eventually caught because of a simple plate forgotten in a dishwasher.
Unfaithful to the spirit of that deliberate.
But the real bombshell is at the end of the video, because there are very strong evidence and theories that this heist triggered the Watergate scandal, which led to Nixon's resignation. Why was Nixon so afraid of these thieves? What else was in the vault besides money? And where are those stolen millions today? If you're ready, turn off the lights. We're going to 1972, to Laguna Niguel. It all began at the United California Bank branch in the town of Laguna Niguel, California. This was a quiet coastal town inhabited by the wealthy and retirees, where the crime rate was nearly zero. The bank, located on the Pacific Coast Highway, PCH, was a fortress with maximum security measures. On the morning of Monday, March 27, 1972, when the bank manager arrived at work, he thought everything was normal. However, when he tried to open the main vault door, he noticed the locks wouldn't turn. The door was jammed. Vault experts were called, but even they couldn't open the door. As a last resort, when they went up to the roof, they froze at the sight they encountered. There was a massive hole in the roof of the bank. The thieves had entered through the roof over the weekend while the bank was closed, drilled through the reinforced concrete ceiling, and made a Mission Impossible style descent into the vault room. The inside was a total war zone. Concrete dust covered everything. Nearly 500 safe deposit boxes had been smashed open, and jewelry, bonds, and cash were scattered across the floor. The thieves were so comfortable that they worked inside for 3 days and even had a picnic and ate food inside. Police and the FBI were stunned when they arrived at the scene. Why hadn't the alarm gone off? Why had no one heard the explosions? Who were these men? The only clues found at the scene were traces of professionally placed explosives and a strange foam sprayed into the alarm box. This was no ordinary robbery. This was a work of art. And there was only one crew capable of pulling it off: the Dinsio gang.
frame job.
Frame job?
Yeah, it'll come out in court.
Come on, get out, gentlemen. Please get us away.
Wait a minute, let him see me. It's a frame job. It'll come out in court. These FBI guys are lying like hell.
The lead role in this story belongs to Dinsio. He was born in Youngstown, Ohio. At that time, Youngstown was a place crawling with organized crime and the mafia. Amil was described by the FBI as the best bank burglar in America. He wasn't a crude thug who did armed robberies. He was a bank burglar. That is, a professional who entered while banks were closed, harmed no one, and handled the job with technical skill.
Mahoning County Jail to turn ourselves in.
Let's get to know this Ocean's 11 team closely. Dinsio, the leader of the operation. He possessed genius-level knowledge of alarm systems, a man who could see beyond the walls when he looked at a bank. James Dinsio, Amil's brother. He used dynamite so precisely that he wouldn't even break a glass next to a concrete block he was blowing up. Drilling the vault ceiling was his job. Harry Barber, Amil's nephew. A fan of Steve McQueen, he loved driving fast cars and was one of the youngest members of the team. As we will see later, the Hollywood connection of this story is established through him. Phil Christopher, another name expert in neutralizing alarm systems, linked to the Cleveland Mafia. He is known by the nickname Super Thief. Charles Mulligan, Amil's brother-in-law and loyal assistant. Ronald Barber, Harry's brother, logistics support. Charles Brokel. This name is important because Brokel was the unwanted man of the team. Amil didn't want him, but those who gave the tip for this job forced him into the team so Brokel could get a share. As we will see later, this decision would be Amil's biggest mistake. These men had robbed more than 30 banks in Ohio and the surrounding area with ease. So, why did they leave their safe zone in Ohio and go to the other end of the country, to California? What was it that drew them there? This part of the story is truly incredible. The tip for the heist had come from one of the most legendary figures of the American underworld, Jimmy Hoffa.
It was 2 years ago this week when Jimmy Hoffa disappeared from a Detroit restaurant parking lot. He is assumed to have been murdered, though the body has never been found.
Jimmy Hoffa was in prison at the time. He was the leader of the Teamsters Union and was expecting a pardon from Richard Nixon. Allegedly, Hoffa had made a $3 million cash donation to Nixon's re-election campaign. This was entirely illegal money that was off the records. Nixon took the money and pardoned Hoffa. However, with one condition. Hoffa could not serve as Union president until 1980. Hoffa was furious. He had lost both his money and his power. He wanted revenge. Using his mafia connections, he reached out to Dinsio and delivered this message. In the United California Bank in Laguna Niguel, Nixon's $30 million secret slush fund is being kept. Go and get it. Go and get it. Go and get it. Go and get it. According to Dinsio, this money wasn't just Hoffa's money. There was also a scandal called milk money. Nixon had also taken millions of dollars in bribes from milk producers by promising to increase milk prices. This money was also in the same bank. For Dinsio, this was the perfect crime. Because if you steal Nixon's money, Nixon couldn't call the police. If he said, my money was stolen, the FBI would ask, "Where did that money come from, Mr. President?" So, Emil would be a thief stealing from a thief. A kind of Robin Hood, but the type who keeps the money for himself. The crew flew from Ohio to California. To avoid drawing attention, they rented a house in a luxury complex near Laguna Niguel. They surveilled the bank for weeks, and on the night of Friday, March 24th, 1972, the operation began. Step 1. Silencing the alarm, the surfer foam tactic. This is very interesting. At that time, bank alarms worked with mechanical bells inside large boxes outside. Because they were in California, Emil and his team used the local culture. Inspired by a nearby surfboard factory, they purchased construction foam. Friday night, the team's alarm expert Phil Christopher and Harry Barber climbed to the alarm box outside the bank. They drilled a small hole and sprayed this liquid foam inside. When the foam expanded and hardened inside, it locked the alarm's clapper. The system was working, the circuits weren't cut, but when the alarm tried to ring, no sound came out because the clapper couldn't move. An ingenious solution. Step 2. Drilling the roof and dynamites. Once the alarm was silenced, the team went up to the roof. The bank's vault room was made of 45 centimeters thick reinforced concrete. It had steel rebar inside. James Dinsio drilled holes with a drill to penetrate the concrete and placed exactly 16 sticks of dynamite in them. The sound of the explosion could have woken up the whole town, but James had a plan. They covered the dynamite with sandbags and heavy blankets. This would direct the force of the blast downward toward the concrete and muffle the sound. At midnight, a boom was heard. But luckily, military exercises were being conducted in the skies above Laguna Niguel that night, and the local residents thought the sound was artillery fire. Step 3. Entering and 3 days of work. The explosion shattered the concrete, but the steel rebar was still there. Emil used an acetylene torch to melt these bars, and finally, a hole large enough for a person to pass through was opened at the top of the vault. The crew lowered themselves inside. The interior was filled with concrete dust and smoke, but when they turned on their flashlights, hundreds of safe deposit boxes stood before them. They stayed inside for exactly 3 nights, from Friday night until Monday morning. They didn't go out. They had food with them. They blasted the safe boxes one by one with custom-made sledgehammers. In an interview given years later, Emil Dinsio describes that moment. When we found Nixon's vault, inside were brand new banknotes with no bank stamps and non-traceable serial numbers. Millions of dollars. Not just money, gold, jewelry, rare collectible coins. Before dawn on Monday morning, the crew exited through the hole in the roof with bags full of money and fled. When the heist was discovered on Monday morning, the FBI was in shock.
Because we were coming on another 3-day weekend, which is customary for these people to operate on.
There were no fingerprints at the scene, no tools. It was a flawless job. The FBI realized this was not the work of local thieves. This looked like a Youngstown job. Especially the tactic of silencing the alarm with foam was Emil Dinsio's signature. The FBI immediately examined the airport records, and what do you think they saw? The entire crew had flown from Ohio to California using their own real names just before the heist. This was incredible arrogance. They thought, they'll never catch us. But what really burned them was a mistake they made in the luxury house they rented. After the heist was over, they had cleaned the house. They had wiped everywhere. But they had forgotten one thing: the dishwasher. When FBI agents raided the house, they found unwashed plates inside the dishwasher. And on one of those plates was a clean fingerprint. This print belonged to one of the Dinsio crew. Technology was new back then, but the FBI managed to match this print. Additionally, a car where the tools used in the heist were kept was found. In the trunk of the car were concrete dust and burglary tools. And of course, that unwanted man added to the crew later, Charles Brokel. When the FBI squeezed him, he sang like a canary in exchange for a sentence reduction and sold out the entire team.
And I want to say this to the television audience. I made my mistakes, but in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent.
This is where the plot thickens. The robbers were caught, but the story didn't end. On the contrary, the real political earthquake was just beginning. After being caught, and in the book he wrote years later, Emil Dinsio insistently argued the FBI wouldn't start such a massive manhunt for a normal bank robbery. Nixon went crazy because his money was stolen. Historians and researchers say that this heist pushed Richard Nixon's paranoia to its peak. The heist happened in March 1972. Do you know what happened just 3 months later, in June 1972? The famous Watergate scandal. That is, Nixon's men were caught trying to enter the Democratic Party headquarters to plant listening devices.
To justice. And I think, too, that I could say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got. President? Yes.
The theory is this. Nixon believed that in his vault in Laguna Niguel, there was not only money, but also documents that would incinerate him. He feared these documents would fall into the hands of the Democrats through the robbers. With this fear, he approved the Watergate operation to bug the Democratic Party and find out what they had. So, that hole opened by Emil Dinsio and his crew indirectly started the process that brought about Nixon's end.
So much for that. And so I would also say Watergate was illegal, and that it was wrong, and that it was very, very stupid thing to do.
So, what happened to that money? The FBI found part of the money during excavations around Dinsio's house in Ohio. Banknotes and gold worth millions of dollars were seized, buried in the ground. However, Emil Dinsio claimed that what was found was just chump change, and that the real large amount is still hidden somewhere or was covered up and destroyed by the FBI. Dinsio and his team received long prison sentences. Harry Barber lived as a fugitive for 8 years, leading a life as a model citizen with a fake identity in a small town, but eventually he too was caught. Today, Emil Dinsio is in his 80s. His eyes still sparkle when he tells of those days. Despite being a criminal, he carries a strange pride in having robbed a president. In his book, Inside the Vault, he argues that the FBI manipulated the evidence and conspired against them. A group of thieves, with some surfboard foam and a little dynamite, may have changed the course of American history. Perhaps it wasn't the journalists in Washington who unseated Nixon, but a group of bank burglars from Ohio. Thanks for watching this video. If you like true crime and history stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Where do you think the rest of that money is? And were there other secrets that Nixon really kept in that vault? Let's meet in the comments. See you in the next video. Goodbye.